Hello, everyone. Thank you, Linda, for that introduction. My name is Steve Moore, and I am an LA Opera League community educator. It's my great pleasure to speak with you today about this historic Puccini opera, Turandot. Let's start by listening to an excerpt from the famous aria, Nessun dorma. Wow. Let me know if anyone has trouble hearing. Did that volume sound okay to everyone?
Sounded good.
All right, great. And wow, what a great aria. Turandot is the final opera composed by one of the world's most popular opera composers. To many, it is Giacomo Puccini's magnum opus. Based on the German dramatist Friedrich von Schiller's adaptation of a dramatized fairy tale by the 18th century Italian playwright Carlo Gazzi, the libretto was written by Giuseppe Adame and Renato Simoni, running May 18th through June 8th, with a running time of 2 hours and 55 minutes, including 2 intermissions. It was last performed at LA Opera way back in 2002.
Wow.
And Puccini's last opera was first performed at La Scala, Milan, April 25th, 1926. Now, Puccini did not live to finish this work, and following a conference between the composer's heirs, his publishers, and Toscanini, the conductor at La Scala, its last duet and finale were completed by Franco Alfano. At the first performance prior to the last duet and finale, Toscanini, who was conducting, turned around to the audience and said, "Here the opera finished. When he had written thus far, the composer died." Giacomo Puccini was the last superstar of the great Italian opera tradition, a genre whose soul was a magnificent blend of intense lyricism, melodiousness, and excellence of the vocal arts. Modern opera is a definitive element of Italian culture. It began with the Florentine Camerata, a group of humanists, musicians, poets, and intellectuals in the early 17th century who gathered to discuss and guide trends in the arts. Over the next 400 years, Italian opera matured, developed, and continually rejuvenated itself, its cast of ingenious musical architects becoming the foundation of the art form. Monteverdi, Scarlatti, Metastasio, Paisiello, Rossini, Donizetti, Bellini, Verdi, and Puccini. No Italian composer since Puccini has been able to sustain the Italian opera's glorious heritage. He composed 12 operas, most of them so beloved by contemporary audiences that they define opera's endurance and survival. So not only is this opera, Turandot, Puccini's last opera, it's really the last opera in this long tradition. And this is its 100th year anniversary of its premiere. So let's go through the synopsis of the story of Turandot. In ancient Peking, China, the beautiful Princess Turandot is filled with bitter hatred against men because her ancestor, Princess Luling, was brutally murdered by a prince. To avenge the death, she demands that anyone who wants to wed her must solve 3 riddles, and those who fail be beheaded. The opera opens as a crowd fills the square and listens motionless while a mandarin reads a decree announcing the Prince of Persia has just failed to solve the riddles and will be decapitated when the moon rises. Kalaf, the enemy Tatar prince in exile, travels in Peking incognito. He is the unknown prince. He recognizes his father, Timur, from whom he's been separated since a battle when they lost their kingdom to China. Timur, old and blind, is accompanied by the young enslaved girl, Liu, who is secretly in love with Kalaf. Dazzled by the princess's breathtaking beauty, Kalaf announces that he will try the riddles. Timur and Liu beg him to come away, but he insists and is about to hit the gong and present himself when Ping, Pang, and Pong, 3 officers of the court, surround him and try to dissuade him by reasoning that even if he saw Turandot naked, it's just flesh, not good to eat. Finally, the prince breaks loose and bangs the gong. He succeeds in giving the correct answers, but Turandot is reluctant to fulfill her promise and pleads with her father, the Emperor Altun, to repudiate her solemn obligation. So Kalaf offers a deal. He is willing to be killed if she can discover his name by sunrise. Turandot orders Liu tortured in order to discover the unknown prince's name. Liu encourages Turandot to find love, then kills herself rather than betray Kalaf. Finally, Kalaf melts Turandot's resistance with a kiss, and then reveals his name to her. However, the victorious Turandot, now transformed from hostility to powerful emotions of love, does not condemn Kalaf to death, but accepts him as her betrothed. I'll be quoting much of the following from an insightful essay titled The Ambiguity of Turandot, an Orientalist Perspective by Hong Yu. For Westerners, the Chinese were bewildering and sometimes paradoxical. These stereotypes of Chinese ranging from diligent laborers, brilliant Confucian intellectuals, ignorant barbarians, and cunning merchants reflect Westerners' oscillating perceptions of China between naive idealization and immutable uncivilization. At the end of the Middle Ages, Italian merchant Marco Polo was the first to fascinate his fellow Europeans about China in the Travels of Marco Polo, which was claimed by some scholars as the backbone of an Orientalist discourse. The book triggered the Europeans' eagerness to explore this treasure of the East. The idealization was enhanced and reinforced during the Renaissance in the 14th through 17th centuries and the early age of Enlightenment. The missionaries and philosophers portrayed China as a high civilization ruled by philosopher kings. It was worshipped by European intellectuals as the land of order, morality, and diligence. This initial admiration for the Chinese changed to contempt beginning in the late 18th century when Europe's economic prosperity provoked its economic and political expansion into the rest of the world. Baron de Montesquieu was among the first to be against China, calling Chinese the most deceitful people in the world. The Genevan philosopher Rousseau stated that there is no vice China does not master, and no crime which it does not know. The popular phrase yellow peril, coined by German Emperor Wilhelm II in 1895, stereotyped Chinese and Japanese as a threat and mortal danger, and combined racist terror of alien cultures, sexual anxieties, and the belief that the West will be overpowered and enveloped by the irresistible dark occult forces of the East. During this period, Europeans produced overgeneralized pictures and images of colonized people to reflect their patronizing perceptions to dominate, disparage, or dehumanize. This is all just a very unfortunate fact of history. This went on. And representations of Orientalism also appeared in plays and operas. The perspective can be traced way back to Aeschylus, the Persians, the earliest Athenian play, in which the Persians are crying after they are defeated by the Greeks. The Europeans in the play are strong, invincible, and Asians are fragile and defenseless. And Turandot is the product of early 20th century Orientalism. In the West, Turandot has been one of the best-known theatrical Chinese figures. The Western readers met her initially in the story of Prince Calaf and the Princess of China, in the French translation of an ancient Persian book, the Book of 1001 Days by French Orientalist François Petit de la Croix. The European artists soon felt compelled to create their own versions of the mythical tale of a marriage-hating Chinese princess. When Giacomo Puccini and his librettist Giuseppe Adami and Renato Simoni started creating the opera in 1920, there had been about 10 operas and 3 stage plays on Turandot. So Puccini created Madame Butterfly in 1904, the Oriental woman's stereotypical model based on the acknowledged Japanese elements in the West. There are 4 rules of the Oriental woman stereotype that this story abides by. First, the Oriental woman exists to serve the Western man who represents the powerful, the superior, the dominant people. Second, the Oriental woman chooses the Western man over Oriental men. Third, the Asian woman cannot legitimately become the Western man's wife. The position is saved for the superior, privileged Western white woman. Fourth, the child, however, belongs to the white man and his white wife, where the child is expected to have a superior life. And Madame Butterfly achieves its success because it caters to the European expectations of ideal femininity, submissiveness, obedience, passivity, and self-sacrificing for a white man. These are the same characteristics that are possessed by Liu in Turandot. On the other extreme is Turandot, the title role. She embodies the dragon lady stereotype. While Liu is diminutive, submissive, and faithful, Turandot is fierce, powerful, and dominant. She's also imperious and malicious, but in the end transforms from an icy, emotionless monster to a love-struck woman. Turandot and Calaf represent the national stereotypes of China and the West, respectively. The refugee prince appears to conquer the uncivilized land controlled by Turandot, a reflection of Western masculine superiority versus Oriental feminine inferiority. The Western creation of a bloodthirsty Chinese princess has been unaccepted by the Chinese for a long time. Wei Minglung, the famous Chinese playwright, accused Puccini's opera of being a fairy tale that the Occidentals have fabricated without an understanding of Chinese culture. Unfortunately, the treatment of Asian characters in movies and TV did not get any better in the 20th century. Charlie Chan, a fictional Honolulu police detective, was the character in a popular series of films, mostly during the 1930s and 40s. While the intelligent and honorable Chan was a contrast with the evil, conniving Asian villain prevalent during the time, the character reinforced Asian stereotypes and highlighted a practice of hiring white actors to play Asian lead characters, often using Scotch tape to make their eyes slanted. The Good Earth, an American drama about Chinese farmers, won 2 Academy Awards. The principal actors were white, even though there were Asian actors that could play the parts in Hollywood at the time. Mickey Rooney played an extremely offensive character in an otherwise respectable Breakfast at Tiffany's. The concept of Kung Fu, the television series, was created by martial arts superstar Bruce Lee, and he was supposed to star in it, but Warner Brothers passed him over for David Carradine, a white actor. As recently as 1984, John Hughes's 16 Candles portrayed a Chinese foreign exchange student for comic relief. The name is so offensive, I won't say it. Several Asian American groups condemned the character as stereotypical, racist, and part of a long history of Hollywood's offensive depictions of Asian men. The legacy of the character was devastating to young Asian American students who were taunted with quotes of the character's lines in poor English. I actually remember this movie because in 1984, I spent the summer in Japan on an exchange program with the Kiwanis Club when I was 16, and then in the fall I went to see the film because when you were a teenager in the 80s, you went to see a John Hughes film, and I remember seeing this character and knowing that it was very wrong, and I really couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then I learned years later that it really impacted young Asian Americans in a very difficult way. And I think just to mention all this, I want to just say that this is very hurtful to Asian people to be excluded from starring in films and TV, and then to be the butt of jokes. And as we learned, this came from a very dark place where it was used to justify the European colonization of these people through the use of stereotypes. So after all this, you may ask, why in progressive Los Angeles in 2024 is Turandot being performed? Well, I think part of the answer is that it's a great opera. And I think as opera fans, we often have to reconcile a troublesome history of misogyny and racism. And I think that, even nowadays we have musicians and artists who have, in their personal lives, have done horrible things. And we all have to question, well, should we, do we still enjoy their music and their art? And I think the answer is that we can. I think we can. I think the important part is recognizing where this is coming from, reflecting on it, and then just appreciating the art for what it is. And in this particular case, it is really a great opera. And even though its inspiration came from a problematic place, the exoticism in foreign music really fascinated Puccini. And his assimilation of its certain elements transformed them into part of his own personal language, creating a new musical style. And this new style really influenced the people that wrote music for television. So I think in many ways, our experience of going to a place to see a story unfold in front of us in the dark and to hear music, that was opera for many centuries. But by the 20th century, that became going to the movies. So I think as you listen to the clips of the music, you'll think, wow, that kind of sounds like movie music. And also it was his other influences around him. For example, he was influenced by Wagner and Wagner's use of leitmotifs, or motives that happen. I'll give you some examples later. And several themes in Turandot were adopted from authentic Chinese music, as well as self-invented Oriental melodies. At the end of the 19th century, Debussy, the composer Debussy, represented the start of the modernist period in music. So by 1924, this movement was well underway. Puccini incorporated his first non-diatonic or kind of out there music in Madame Butterfly, inspired by Debussy, and it's particularly his use of the whole tone scale. And Stravinsky influenced Puccini's use of dissonance in Turandot. And while embracing new influences, Puccini remained true to his Italian roots. This is essentially a comedy dell'arte. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but this opera is in a very traditional form of entertainment, actually comedy, from Italy. And he was the quintessential melodist, and his personal lyricism had few rivals. At the 1913 premiere of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, there was derisive laughter, which devolved into terrific uproar. Let's listen to an excerpt. So the dissonant punching chords in this shocking piece are what's known as bitonal harmonies. And Puccini incorporated this modernist style in Turandot. So here's the very beginning of Turandot, and you can hear those same type of dissonant punching chords. And bitonal means literally two tonalities or harmonies played at the same time. In this piano version of the score, you can see the D minor harmony in the left hand and the C sharp major harmony in the right hand. And here's how the two harmonies sound separately and together. So we got D minor, then C sharp major, and then played together. So separately, they're okay, but together sound pretty weird. Let's give that another listen. And here's what the beginning of the opera sounds like. And a few seconds in, we'll hear those bitonal harmonies. So the dissonant bitonal chord structure suggests the executioner's axe falling. So in the 1920s, as Puccini created Turandot, Europe was enjoying its economic and cultural prosperity and global expansion. China, in the same period of time, suffered political and economic instability. So in the eye of a European, China was associated with barbarism and despotism. At the beginning of this opera, the street of Peking is full of gruesome stakes with skulls of those whom the princess has executed, and the crowd is restless, indecisive, and scared of the princess. It is the image of China in the mind of Puccini and his librettists. And if we just think about it, he listened to Stravinsky and he said, I can use this in my opera to help tell the story. And to me, that's what opera is all about, is using music to tell the story. And this is just one example of how he did that with the influences that were around him. Speaking of other influences, In Liu's music, Puccini really bared his musical soul for the character who became the true Puccinian heroine in the opera, a woman who became the victim of her yearning for love, but must sacrifice that love to death. And much of Liu's music, like Signore Ascolta, aria shown here, is composed in the pentatonic harmony of the five-note scale. So I'll explain that a little bit more. And notice that the aria is in the key of G. This is if you don't understand how to read music, this indicates the key of G flat major, which has 6 flats. Now, if you know anything about scales in music, a major scale is oh shoot. Uh-oh. It looks like I'm losing connection here.
You sound fine.
Oh, okay. I saw my router light up, so I thought I was about to lose everyone. So anyway, so this is the so if you know anything about a major scale, you have 8 notes, but then you have just 7 individual notes, and then the 8th note is the same as the first note. And so 6 flats means you have almost every single note is flatted. And if you're learning music and you're learning your scales, your teacher will just say, hey, if you're doing a G flat major, it's almost all, accidentals or flats. But Liu, singing this, is really only singing 5 of these notes. And they happen to be all the black notes on the piano. Here, I'll play that again. And the black notes on the piano are G flat, A flat, B flat, D flat, and E flat. So let's listen to that pentatonic scale again. So to me, the greatest coincidence in human history is this pentatonic or 5-note scale. It appears in the music of ancient people all over the world that never met each other, except maybe very, very long time ago, including Southeast Asia, where, this music has inspired Puccini. Of course, the Native Americans sang the pentatonic scale. Also, you see it in the Middle East, India, and of course, Africa. And in fact, if you add a couple of blue notes to the pentatonic scale, you get the blues scale, which is in all genres of modern music. And I just have to say that when I was growing up, we had a piano in my house, and I never could learn piano. I can't do 2 things at once. But I would walk up to the piano and I just bang on the black notes. As a kid, I'd say, oh, this is the Indian song, because even as a kid, I recognized this pentatonic scale from watching a Western movie when you see, oh, here come the Indians, and you hear this pentatonic melody. So here is an example from Liu's aria, Signore Ascolta, and every single note is within the pentatonic scale. And this is the great soprano Montserrat Caballé. So many of the themes in Turandot were adopted from a Chinese music box belonging to an acquaintance of Puccini's, a diplomat who was a collector of Oriental art. This is a picture of what that might have looked like. And there are fragments of the Chinese national anthem that underscore the music of the three ministers, Ping, Pang, and Pong. And the authentic Chinese folk song, Mo Li Hua, or the Jasmine Flower, is the music identified with the Princess Turandot. And here's what this is what it would have sounded like on that music box. So Puccini listened to this and became obsessed with the melody. And you hear it in Turandot's theme many, many times throughout the opera. I'm going to play examples. And here it is, the first time it's sung by a children's choir in the first act. The theme then triumphantly announces the first arrival of Turandot. It's repeated when Calaf announces his love for Turandot. Then to end Act One, as Calaf commits to the challenge. Okay, I'm going to see if you're paying attention. Does anyone remember how many times he hit the gong? Anybody? Three. You will notice three is the magic number on this opera. It's not the only one, and I think that it comes from the tradition, the Italian tradition of commedia dell'arte. Maybe it's something that the Italians are obsessed with the Holy Trinity. But there's so many examples of threes. Just to give a couple examples, there was the gong, hitting the gong three times, the three riddles he has to answer, the three ministers here we're looking at right now, Ping, Pang, and Pong. There is lots of music that has three notes in the melody. You know, I always have to mention in my talks here that the LA Opera has a podcast. It's called Behind the Curtain, but you can just search for LA Opera on your podcast app. And they did drop Maestro James Conlon, who will be conducting. He always gives a talk ahead of his presentation, and they're good enough to share that talk or a version of it on the podcast. And he does go into detail about this three, the number three, and he has some more examples that I can't think of off the top of my head. But I would highly recommend listening to that podcast, especially if you're not going to be in time to see his presentation before the opera. So in Act Two, the children's chorus sings the theme to introduce Turandot for Calaf's challenge. And because Turandot is the answer to the last of the three riddles, we hear the theme again, of course, when he announces the answer to the question. In Act Three, the theme is sung as Turandot arrives to torture Liu. So that's Ping there singing along with the theme, describing how he's going to torture Liu. And here we hear the theme again, but it's quieter. You'll hear it in the orchestra briefly, and it's just before Liu's sacrifice. Now we hear it during Turandot's transformation. So the kiss has already happened, and you hear her really lamenting the losing her power. And it's not as magnificent as we heard before. And then Calaf kind of takes the theme and starts saying, no, this is like you're being reborn, you're being transformed into something better. Now, similar to Turandot's theme, or I should say related to Turandot's theme, is the theme for her father, Emperor Altoon. And here is his introduction prior to Calaf's challenge. His theme is repeated following Calaf's success in answering the three riddles. Here it is played again at the beginning of the final scene. So those are examples of Puccini using motives or the Wagnerian leitmotifs to help us kind of help tell the story by having these characters have a theme song essentially. So the tenor aria Nessun dorma, and I played it at the beginning of my presentation, is one of the most famous of all opera excerpts. And it's a highlight of Act Three. Although it had been a staple of operatic recitals, Luciano Pavarotti popularized the piece beyond the opera world in the 1990s following his performance of it for the 1990 FIFA World Cup, which captivated a global audience. Here's an excerpt from that performance. So you can imagine all the people tuning in to watch, soccer, football, and seeing this. They're not likely opera fans, but I'm sure some of you have heard of the Three Tenors. The Three Tenors are Luciano Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, and Jose Carreras, and this was their first gig, and they became superstars. Okay. But the melody of this great aria is introduced before he actually sings it, as Calaf offers Turandot the option to escape her obligation if she can identify his name. So this is where we first hear the melody. Here is Calaf at the beginning of Act Three singing the famous aria. The melody is repeated by the chorus as the grand finale to the opera. This is the very end of the opera. So what's interesting about this, I showed you the very beginning of the opera, and I just showed you the very end of the opera. I always like to look at the very beginning and the very end. And what we learned was at the very beginning, remember, we had that dissonance, we had that Stravinsky-like, everything was kind of, it was a scary scene and very dissonant. And then we end in a very consonant, a place that is more diatonic, that is more understanding. We know where we are and where we land, with this great aria, which repeats the phrase 3 times at the end, which again, we have that 3. And even the aria itself starts off with a diminished chord, which is a very ambiguous chord, but then ends up being very diatonic, and we hear where we have a satisfying release. And I think that's part of the appeal of this aria. This aria really is maybe the most famous, well-known, well-beloved aria in the entire operatic repertoire. And it's going to be exciting to see Russell Thomas sing it at LA Opera. Speaking of the LA Opera production, pop artist David Hockney creates a striking, fantastical vision of mythical China, full of grandeur in a production new to LA. Music director James Conlon will conduct. Angela Mead sings the title role. Artist in residence Russell Thomas sings the role of Calaf. Soprano Guan Chun Yu sings Liu. And the great Morris Robinson will sing the role of Timur. Let's watch the promo video. Okay, now I have to show, this was a late add to my presentation, but I have to show you this clip. So in the Grammy Awards 1998, remember I showed you that video of Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma, and he was hired to sing it in front of a full orchestra at the Grammy Awards in 1998. But just minutes before he was supposed to go on, his doctors said he couldn't do it. He had a throat condition. And Aretha Franklin was there, and they asked, well, Aretha, can you fill in literally at the last minute, like 20 minutes before this was supposed to happen? And she agreed to do it. It wasn't so way out there. She had just performed it a couple days before at an art festival or a music festival. But here it is in its entirety, Nessun Dorma, performed by Aretha Franklin at the 1998 Grammy Awards.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aretha Franklin.
Nessun dorma, nessun dorma. Tu pure, oh principessa, nella tua fredda stanza, guardi le stelle che tremano d'amore e di speranza. Within my heart, my secret lies, and what his name is, none shall know, none till on thy eyes I confess it. Soon as morning light shall oh, Prince, then shall my kisses break the silence that may be mine.
Just wow. It's a testament to Puccini's genius for creating a masterpiece and Aretha Franklin interpreting it.